Hello kawan Eva, welcome back to podcast FHUB. With me Kiran Chaya, we will be guiding and sparking the discussion in today's episode. In this episode, we will unravel a topic often surrounded in misconception and hesitation. Can kawan Eva guess what it is? It is a trend among Gen Z or millennials. We will be talking about the prenuptial agreements. Is it merely an unromantic legal formality or could it be the wisest decision a couple makes before saying I do? To get to know the answer, join us as we explore the truth with the benefits and, of course, the important questions every soon to be married couple should consider before saying I do, and also consider to protecting their future together. And of course, to delve deeper into this topic, this time podcast FHUB is bringing in a special guest, Ibu Cyndiarnis SHMH. For the information, Ibu Cindy is a lecturer at the Faculty of Law Universitas Brawijaya. Let's say hi to Ibu Cindy. Good afternoon, Ibu Cindy.
Hello, good afternoon.
Okay, Ibu Cindy, are Ibu Cindy in a good condition or in a good health?
Yes, I'm in a very good condition and a good health, and I can't wait to share my opinion regarding the
Okay.
prenuptial agreement to Gensis like you.
Gen Z is like me. Okay, I'm so glad that Ibu Cindy is in a good health and of course in a good condition as well. Okay, I will. Before we start the discussion, I would like to express my sincere gratitude as a host of this podcast, Eva Ube, that Ibu Cindy is willing to take the podcast or take the time to share the experience or knowledge to the kawan Eva. Okay, Ibu Cindy, I would like to ask like a very basic question. First, Ibu Cindy is a lecturer in Faculty of Law who focusing on civil law, right?
Yes, I'm focusing more like a contractual one. So
Contractual.
I think when we are talking about the prenuptial agreement, the first common misconception is that a prenuptial agreement is not considered as the contract in
Okay.
book 3 of our Indonesian Civil Code, but it's rather more like a first book or the
First book.
first chapter
Oh,
of the
this is-
Indonesian Civil Code.
Okay, but very interesting topic for the first starter, and so Ibu Cindy must be very familiar with regarding prenuptial agreements.
Yes, of course, especially when it's all the trending topics amongst the Gen Zs.
Since
They are most likely saying like, marriage is scary, right?
yes,
Yeah.
yeah,
But actually, marriage is not scary as long as you can find, of course, the right
the
partner,
right person.
and
Okay.
of course, you can find the right regulation, or you are knowing the basic regulation of the marriage itself.
Okay, so the right partners and also finding a right regulations. And as we know, just like Ibu Cindy said, recently on social media, millennials or Gen Z are talking about prenuptial agreement and increasingly becoming aware about prenuptial agreement, which is I think it's a good thing because awareness about marriage is for like more open-minded into the future of protecting our future together as a couple like that. And however, we still need to know about the legal perspective on the theoretically importance of prenuptial agreements, especially among the younger generation between it is Gen Z or millennials. And to start this, I would like to ask what is the real meaning of prenuptial agreements, especially on the legal perspective. Cindy.
Okay, thank you for your question. So it's the basic one, but the most important one in my opinion, because if we are taking a look at the regulative perspective, we see that prenuptial agreement was actually being regulated in the Indonesian marriage law and also in the Indonesian Civil Code, and it's talking about how. Before we are talking about the prenuptial agreement, I'm going to share the legal perspective of the joint assets in the marriage. So once a male and a female is having a marriage relationship, so their asset will becoming a joint asset.
Joint assets.
So by the terminology of joint asset, this means that all of the belongings of the wife will also become the husband's,
Husband.
and also vice versa. And by having a prenuptial agreement, this particular provision will be neglected. So their assets will become the wife's asset, and also the husband will still becoming the husband assets. So there's no terminology of joint assets, but more likely their personal assets. Like that.
So it's more like separated assets.
Yeah,
If-
they will have separated assets for that.
if a couple set a prenuptial agreement, so the asset will be separated.
Yeah.
It is the meaning of what is that?
Prenuptial
Prenuptial
agreement.
agreements. Okay, and the second question will be more like mechanism or more technical. How do prenuptial agreements protect individual assets in the marriage?
Ah, it is very interesting question. I'm going to give some examples in here. Just for example, the husband has no work or has no occupations. All that he wants to do all day was just playing Mobile Legends. Oh, sorry, I'm mentioning a name in here.
It's okay.
Okay, playing online games or maybe having like a doing some their hobbies without giving anything or having no contribution to the marriage, while the wife in the on the contrary, the wife has been working all day and she also taking care of the house, and also she is also taking care of the child and many more.
Yeah.
And after that, the husband has so many debt, and after having so many debt, of course the debt will be burdened not only to the husband but also to the
Right.
wife. So, since they are having a joint asset like I mentioned before, and of course it seems unfair, right?
Unfair
Yeah,
for the
unfair.
women.
Not only for the women but also for the child as well.
Yes.
And for that, to protect the individual assets of the women, they need to make a prenuptial agreement. But here comes the problem. In Indonesia, before the constitutional court decision, we only recognize the prenuptial one, which means that if the husband or the male or the female didn't make the prenuptial beforehand, then they cannot make it anymore.
Yeah.
But since the constitutional court decision in the 2015, and we also acknowledge the postnuptial agreement, so it's basically the prenuptial agreement, but it is made after the marriage. And because of that, so when maybe you were, I didn't know the prenuptial agreement at the beginning of our marriage, but when you realize it now, so you can make the postnuptial agreement.
Okay. So prenuptial agreements protects individual assets by clearly specifying which properties remain separate and not combined with marital assets, right?
Yeah, there's no marital assets in
Oh, yes.
when you're making a prenuptial agreement, so there's no marital assets in this case. But it doesn't erase or it doesn't decreasing the husband obligation to give the wife its proportions.
Okay, so it clears the misconception here, marital
Yeah.
assets. And of course, based on Ibu Cindy's way of saying, I guess prenuptial agreement giving more chance for the women as well to have their own career. So the
Yeah.
burden is not only for labor, but it also can be have a freedom or free will for the women to sip or stick their career path as well. And for the next question, it's about the legal, more like legal products. What legal considerations should Gen Z couples keep in mind when drafting a prenuptial agreements?
Okay, so when these couples are going to get married, and they're more likely following what is on trending, like on what is trending on the social media or like a YouTube or TikTok, and sometimes the YouTube and TikTok give some misconception regarding these particular matters. And as for example, like this, I have seen that some public figure that's saying I'm making a prenuptial agreement that's saying that you have to give me 100 of roses
Yes.
in every month. That they are saying it's monthversary.
Yes.
Yeah, monthlyversary, that you have to give me 100 roses, or maybe like some public figures also making a prenuptial agreement which content is talking about when you are cheating or when one of us is cheating,
Yeah.
then you have no right of the house, you have no right of this property, you can just leave the house with only what you are wearing right now. So basically it's not a prenuptial agreement.
Okay.
The only thing that the Gendis keep in mind is that the content of a prenuptial agreement, both prenuptial and postnuptial, that's
Yes.
only to separate their marital assets. So this means that when they are having a debt or they are having a profit, there's only for a personal only. not becoming a joint or
True.
become a joint obligations. So as for example, the wife has some debt, it's her obligations, not the wife's, and also vice versa. So that's why you have to keep in mind. And also when you're making a prenuptial agreement, the husband still needs to give a contribution to the wife also, like what we are calling in the Indonesia is we call that as nafkah.
Yes.
When we are giving nafkah, the husband giving nafkah to the wife, then it's still their obligation even though they have made some prenuptial agreement. Most men and I think most of the games is thinking that, oh, because we are making a prenuptial agreement, so this means that I don't need to give my wife money.
Money.
It's actually a misconception. You still have this obligation, and while the wife still need to make a contribution to take care of the household,
Okay.
despite of her being a working mom or
moms.
working wife or anything, still needs to make a contribution to the house. And also for it goes the same to
Yes.
the main, because the main thing that we need to keep in mind for the Ginzis is that when you're making a prenuptial agreement, it only talks about the separation of the assets. That's all. And you cannot add anything more than that because it's not of the prenuptial agreement. So what happens when you're making this kind of agreement that is not the content of the prenuptial agreement, then it has no binding. When
Okay.
we are talking, it has no binding, which means that in the term of the legal perspective is that since it's not binding, then you're not obligated to do that.
Okay. So I was just thinking, freedom of contract, the principle, is it applied on the prenuptial agreement?
Okay, the principle of freedom of contract, basically, like I'm saying, it is only for the agreement that is regulated in the Book 3 or the Chapter
Okay.
3 of the Indonesian Civil Code. While we are talking about the prenuptial agreement, it's actually in the Book 1 and also the marriage law.
Okay.
So it's a
Very
very different agreement. Even though it is called the agreement, it's not the agreement as in the Book 3. Because when we are talking about the freedom of contract principle, it's actually for the commercial contract.
Oh,
When we are talking about commercial, so it means that they have like a value, the value uh, or they are making this to gain some profits. While we are making the prenuptial agreement, it's not considered for a profit, but rather to separate the marital assets. So that's why it is two different kind of principle that applies.
so it's very different, right? Between commercial agreements and also prenuptial agreements. So
Yes,
I
it's
guess
different.
we highlight the misconception of great again. And then my next question: can prenuptial agreements be made after marriage, which is postnuptial agreement, in Indonesia, and what are the legal implications?
Okay, this is a very interesting question because it is the court decision is already published in the 2015, but actually it is kind of hard in terms of implementation because of there is no regulation that stipulated regarding about how the mechanism for the postnuptial to work. As for example, like this, when a husband and a wife has already a joint assets, and then suddenly they want to make an postnuptial agreement in here, and they are facing troubles. How do we separate the joint marriage?
Okay.
Nah, actually, there's still no regulation for that, and also this becoming a discourses until now. Even though the issues has already been about 10 years ago, but discourses and the answer still remains unknown. So I guess we need to the of course the regulation maker need to realize this. So that's why is the postnuptial is not happening in Indonesia? I think that's one of the biggest problems or and also one of the biggest challenge in the postnuptial agreement in terms of Indonesian regulation. We still have no mechanism for that.
So it haven't conducted in Indonesia about postnuptial agreements.
Actually, it's not yet conducted because when we are talking about why the constitutional court giving this kind of postnuptial agreement, it's actually comes from the one person. It is a woman, and she's marrying a foreigners, and after she's marrying a foreigners, and suddenly they want to buy a house, and when they are buying a house, and suddenly the developer said that, oh, you cannot buy a house since your husband is a foreigner, and then she said, okay, then I will make a separate joint assets for us, which is I'm going to make a prenuptial agreement. And then they also said, oh, you cannot do that either. Why? Because you have already didn't make your chance before the marriage, and we didn't recognize the postnuptial agreement. And so this particular women going making this issue goes to the constitutional court, that's saying that we should be able to make this kind of agreement not only before the marriage but also after the marriage. So that's the only postnuptial agreement that I know. And when we are talking about in the notarial aspect, there's a lot of notaries that didn't want to make the postnuptial agreement, since there is still unclear about the regulation. How should we make this postnuptial agreement?
So practically, it's very difficult because there is still a whole about the regulation about postnuptial agreements in Indonesia. And my next question is about the trend among Gen Z and millennials. What are common misconceptions about prenuptial agreements among young Indonesian couples, especially Gen Z?
Okay, so when we have already talked about this earlier, that Gen Z tends to follow their public figure on
Yes.
TikTok and in YouTube, and sometimes they also didn't have a comprehensive learning regarding the prenuptial and postnuptial agreement. So the misconception that they are often making is that the first one, they are making the prenuptial agreement or the postnuptial agreement by a private deed. By a private deed, it means that only the both of parties sign it.
Okay.
Okay. When we are looking at the regulation, the both prenuptial and both postnuptial agreement should be made in the notarial deed. By making the notarial deed, it means that you will have to meet the notary to make this agreement. Yeah, this is the first misconception. But we have already signed this, and we have already accept this, and other formalities like that. But it is actually didn't work that way, because the regulation stated that the prenuptial and postnuptial agreement should be made under the notarial deed. So that's the first misconception. And the second one is that the content that we have already talked so much earlier,
Yes.
that they are making a lot of misconception again in the content, like when one of us cheating, that's one that you will leave the house only with what you're wearing, what you're currently wearing, or something like that. Actually, prenuptial agreement doesn't work that way, so it has no binding effect. And also, they're often making that when one of us cheated, that you have no right for the child. The child goes to the one that still remains loyal, and it also doesn't work that way, because when we are talking about the who has the right of the children, it is actually the up to the court decisions, not based on your soulmate prenuptial agreement.
Okay. So right of the child is not conducted in this prenuptial agreement.
Yes. No.
Okay. Maybe my last question. How do prenuptial agreements protect financial interest in nationality or marriage in Indonesia?
Okay, so for this question, it's actually quite hard to answer, because as we know that sometimes the urgency of making the prenuptial agreement, it goes to the mixed marriage one.
Yes, mixed.
Mixed marriage in here, not also there's some misconception. Mixed marriage in here doesn't mean that when the couples have a different beliefs, but it is when the couples have different nationalities, and since they have different nationalities, of course the different regulation may apply to both of them. And most of the mixed marriage couple tends to make this particular prenuptial agreement because, like I have already told you,
Yes.
that the foreigner cannot have a house in the Indonesian. And after that, in order to this couple to have a house, then they will have a separate assets.
Okay.
So the house will be put under the women's name or the male's name who is Indonesians, and it will becoming an important aspect, since when we are marrying, of course our next goal is that to have their own house. It is very fortunate if you have your own house before the marriage, but actually some of the couples may have a little bit struggle of having a house, right?
Yes.
So that's why when you are marrying like a mixed nationality in here or different nationality with your spouse, then you may consider to want to have a prenuptial agreement beforehand, before your marriage, before you're saying I do. Yeah. That's
Just-
it.
Because Indonesia is very crucial given the restriction on foreign ownership of an Indonesia.
Yes, you're right about that.
Okay. Okay, that question will be my last question of this podcast episode, Ibu Cindy. And once again, I want to say thank you so much, Ibu Cindy, for kindly taking the time for sharing the knowledge and sharing the experience about the prenuptial agreements. So indeed, a prenuptial agreement is not mandatory to fill in as a couple of marriage, but if a couple has a prenuptial agreement, they will receive a benefit of legal protections regarding household issues they face, whether it concerns financial problems or other issues as well. Hopefully, in these discussions, today's podcast can provide an understanding from the legal perspective regarding the trends of prenuptial agreements, especially among Gen Z and millennials. That's all from me, Kirana Jaya, as the host of podcast FHUB, and Ibu Cyndiarnis Cahyani SHMH as the speaker today on the podcast FHUB. I apologize if there were any mistake in my words, and thank you very much for watching podcast FHUB. Let's meet again in another episode. And maybe for the last I would like to ask to Ibu Cindy if you made to waving at the camera and say see you again kawan Eva with me together.
Okay.
Okay, in 3, 2, 1. 3, 2, 1. See you again kawan Eva.